Okay, welcome to the Swing Trading with Cycles channel. We're going to do an update on crypto here. It is November 14th. So last week we had the whole well, I guess it's still unfolding now, the whole FTX saga. So if you're not following me on Twitter, definitely take a look at the link in the description. But I tweeted about this, that it looks like November 9th could have been our daily cycle low for Bitcoin. That famous 60-day cycle, and I say 60 in quotes, call it around 60 days, right? Not won't be exactly 60, but that could have happened on day 63, right? So we topped out on day 6. We had this just ugly, disgusting, look at this sideways grind above 18,000-ish, basically. So below 20, but above 18. And then we had this little move up, this like fake out, and then woof, the waterfall decline. Now, this is definitely not a bullish look because we're just consolidating inside the range of this candle. So the day after the big meltdown, or after this big red candle, we got this candle that remained an inside candle but tried to make a higher high. It didn't do it. We really need to get above 18,600 to get outside the range of this candle, and so that does make the levels very clear at this point, and so we're way below that, obviously. And so you could even see a world where we get a little surge up to around there, up to around 18,000 before we kind of fail lower. But we're at the home stretch, I would think, and we'll talk about that in terms of the long-term cycle, because we're getting close to where we would expect around the 4-year cycle low. But you can see this yellow line here is a 200-day moving average, clearly moving aggressively lower, and this blue line is the 10-day moving average. So at some point you expect us to get a little bit of a rally and a move above the 10-day moving average, but that's obviously moving lower in real time. And if we look at Ether in that same context, that cycle count isn't quite as clear, but the pattern is exactly the same. So we have this, this low here on day 73, let's call it, for ETH. Now, the thing about ETH that's important is that this low remains a higher low, higher than this 880 level. And so while Bitcoin is making lower lows, ETH actually happened to hold together. But it's the same kind of not so good move. Like, you can see this rally actually failed right around the 200-day moving average, that yellow line that's aggressively sloping lower. And again, it's the same pattern for ETH slightly. And so in the case of ETH, that following day, that next candle actually did make a higher high. I mean, you can see, I'll zoom in, right? We actually did get above the high from the last day of the last big day of the sell-off. So that high was 1336. And so we did get above that briefly, but then we came back, pulled back hard. And since then, we've been consolidating sideways to lower. So today we have a bullish outside candle so far because it's green, but it's now become a doji. So it could just as easily become a bearish outside candle. That's an important concept to understand. Once something becomes an outside candle, it'll always be an outside candle. The only thing that could change is it could go from green to red or red to green. Right now, it looks like we're threatening to potentially go from green to red, which would be really ugly, right? But that's the kind of daily chart picture for ETH and Bitcoin. Now we'll look at the weekly and the monthly. So last time we did this update, and you can, as always, take a look at the link in the description for that last update. Week 17 was the low. We've since made a lower low here on week 21. That was last week. And now we're in week 22. So for ETH, I'll zoom into ETH. It's clearly above the low from last week, which was, let's see here, that was 1071, right? So we're just, at the same time, we're like in no man's land. Look at this weekly candle. Just a doji inside candle for right now. Bitcoin is much closer to the lows from last week. So the low from last week was 15,632. And so this week we actually made a low that was just about $150 above that. So as has been the trend, Bitcoin is underperforming ETH. It's just weaker in terms of its market structure by quite a bit. And then, most importantly, we'll close out with the monthly charts, right? And so when you look at the monthly chart for ETH, we'll start with it's what we think is month 17 of a long-term cycle. And you can see this is the November candle. This is October, September, August. These have all basically been consolidating inside a range between 1800 and 1200, more or less. We had these pokes down below. We had this little excursion above. But that 1800 area has been sort of a ceiling of resistance for a little bit, which actually coincides with the low from May, which was, about halfway through the big sell-off. Like you can see these three big months of dump. April, May, each candle bigger than the next, meaning more and more downside follow through, right? So now it's a question of, have we finally tested the low end of this range enough, and now we're going to go back and test the high, the 1800? That's what we're going to want to see. And more importantly, do we have a final low? Because right now, that 880 level that happened back in June, that's still holding. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the year has gone by so quickly, but like that was like 5 months ago, right? Like that was a long time ago, actually. Now, I still think it's very possible we get a plunge below that. I mean, the fact that we got to 1070 is like super close. I mean, it's not that much percentage further down to get back to that 880 level. And this, in general, presents as a bear flag of this move lower. So definitely, very likely we get a final capitulation, certainly into the triple digits, and very, very possible breaking below that 880 level. Previous cycles have bottomed around month 15, right? And we're now on month 17. So, maybe this is going to be a longer one. Maybe we get a plunge into December. So we get a bottom on month 18, like below this low. We'll see. And then we go to Bitcoin, which has a much more famous 4-year cycle. The sort of teal line is the 50-month moving average, and the lighter blue line is a 10-month moving average. You can see we're way below the 10-month moving average, and we have been since March, basically. We fell below that in March, and really we haven't even come anywhere close to testing it, actually. And we fell below the 50-month moving average in August, and we're still well below that. All that to say, very clear that, this is something like we're checking all the boxes for a potential major bottom. Now, what could happen is we get a bottom and it doesn't give us a V-shaped rally. That's something to be prepared for. I guess in a way, you can almost say ETH did that. Like, let's say the 880 level holds, then that would be an example of a bottom that's not a V bottom, right? Because it certainly didn't just bounce up. It's been just consolidating sideways. So we might see that for Bitcoin too, right? So this is our low for month 47. Who knows? Maybe that serves as the final low. Maybe we get a final plunge to 12,000. But maybe after that plunge to 12,000, we don't rocket up to 20, right? Maybe we just kind of consolidate between 12,000 and 16,000 for a really long time. That's frustrating. That we're going to have to see. No way to know for sure in advance. And if we look at the quarterly charts, just to get another kind of perspective, again, big picture, you can see just an inside quarter for ETH. For Bitcoin, since we're making new lows, it is, new lows on the quarterly chart. I mean, look at that. This chart of Bitcoin screams out to you that, that seems unthinkable, but you could see a world where we get a plunge to 4,000. And I know people will holler at the moon about how that's not possible because of on-chain or what have you. More likely, you rest around this area. A lot of people have called out for different reasons. I'd say the most significant is the shape of this quarterly chart. You could easily see a move to around 10,000. But again, markets undershoot and overshoot. So if we get to that 10,000 level, wouldn't be crazy for us to slice through it and have a wick to 4,000. But we'll see. 10,000 does seem kind of imminent, which is, what is that? Like another 30-40% down from here. We're already down something like 70%. But we're probably closer to the end. Look at these are the previous 4-year cycle declines, right? This was not a 4-year cycle decline, but a pretty brutal one, you can see. So at some point, this is going to turn as well. We just may need to get sort of a nice plunge wick lower to then move out of it. So that's the update on crypto, and obviously with a focus on Bitcoin and ETH.